way to start off a stream. Um, Alright, so I'm not really going to be doing anything too intensive. Right now, I'm really just, kind of doing this for the sake of trying to give, my, streaming setup a proper shake. I managed to kind of semi-successfully stream Kirby's Dream Land previously. But there kind of wound up being a matter of, like, just after I stopped, OBS kind of had kind of a weird time and decided to just crash. And I've been kind of trying to just kind of figure out the best way to do some of this stuff with making sure that I don't have my streaming software going bad, especially since I do want to, at some point, do this a bit more seriously, try a slightly, how to put it? Kind of want to try doing long games, and I want to make sure OBS will be working when that happens. So, yeah, I'm just going to be doing a quick little endurance run for, you know, just seeing how long I can keep this going, and, well, just try to have some fun. Let's see. Oh, hold on. So yeah, let's play.
Mario brother.
Alright, so yeah, this is Mario Brothers. Yeah, this cartridge, Super Mario Advance, was in fact my first Game Boy Advance game. Got the I think the name of the color was Glacier. It was it was that kind of see-through purple kind of option. And I remember I kind of had the option thinking about what I wanted to do for the first game I would have for the system. And I remember at the time thinking it was kind of a toss-up between I wanted to either get this, I wanted to get Super Mario Advance, or it was going to be F-Zero Maximum Velocity. And I remember the thing that kind of tipped me over was that the dude at the electronics store was kind of recommending the idea of going with you know, Mario over F-Zero, which, you know, seems to have worked out, I think. I don't think I would have minded F-Zero being my choice in the end, but I kind of think this kind of worked out because there's a bit more of me enjoying a platformer over a racing game. There's kind of a lot of, I mean, there's obviously some replayability to a racing game, but Super Mario Advance kind of had the advantage of, at least when it comes to the main game, there's kind of the fact that, you know, you can kind of get some mileage out of trying to get to the end of Super Mario 2. And besides that, there was also this game. Super Mario 2 also kind of had the advantage of trying to... oh, heck. Super Mario 2 also had the advantage of, like, they had that little bit of extra content with the Yoshi Egg Hunt. Once you'd finished up the game on the initial run. I never finished the Yoshi Egg Hunt, but, like, yeah, it was fun to have that little extra bit of stuff to do once you'd finished up the thing for the first time. And of course there was this Mario Brothers arcade remake type thing. And I definitely remember getting some mileage out of this, having some fun with it. I think I spent my fair share of car rides playing this. And it's pretty nice because it's a thing of, like, it really is just like a pick up and play kind of thing. Whereas you kind of have to commit a little bit if you're gonna play through a bit of Super Mario 2. And it's like, yeah, there's progression in this, but you're kind of have the one kind of formula that you're going through nonetheless. And it doesn't feel like you're really losing anything if you have to turn off the game and do something else. I think one thing that kind of helped with, at least on the Mario Brothers 2 side, was that when it came down to it, you could eventually get, like, the game save type stuff, which made it easier to pick up and play again compared to this, but I mean, this is definitely still the kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, I could probably, you know, just do this, have fun. You can turn it off and come back to it later if you want to. It's kind of one of those things that when I think about it, it's actually almost kind of like what I think kind of works best with, say, like a mobile game where there's very much that you can pick it up and put it back down anytime you want. And it's almost kind of funny how some of that stuff has not really been done for a mobile game type thing. At least on Nintendo's end, because of, when I think about it, like, Nintendo has definitely done some attempts at mobile, like there's been the Mario Kart, there was the Super Mario Run, and of course there's been all sorts of other things that have been... I forgot how tricky this slipperiness could be. Yeah, still got it. But yeah, like, when it comes to mobile games, like, there's... Like, you definitely have to get a mobile game designed properly to go with the sensibilities of it's just something you can get into and get out and it's good. And a lot of arcade games that kind of fit this style feel like they should fit that well, and yet I don't feel like that's something you really see being taken advantage of when it comes to that being implemented as a, you know, type of game. Because I could totally see Nintendo, like, taking this original arcade Mario Brothers and making it a mobile game. And it could easily be a thing of, I suppose I'm not entirely sure how they would monetize it, because, I mean, that is kind of the thing, ultimately, that you gotta make money. I mean, I suppose it would kind of be a matter of, oh, you can only go so far before you have to shell out for extra enemy stage type things, though, I don't know, I suppose maybe that wouldn't work too well. Because, I mean, that is kind of the thing, unfortunately, that, I could see it also maybe working as just a... like a paid app with, like, maybe just a low price, like, you know, maybe a few bucks. But it's kind of a thing of, unfortunately, when it comes to, you know, mobile game environment, you kind of have to have a free-to-play thing, at least when it comes to the more popular stuff. And I suppose also when it comes to, this, like to this Mario game in particular, there's also kind of the difficulty with, when it comes to control style, because, like, it really is the thing that, when you really take kind of any sort of a consideration for control, like, yeah, you could do the thing of, oh, you just put the control pad on the touch screen. Oh my. Yeah, it's like, yeah, you could put, like, a virtual D-pad and, buttons on the screen, but that, honestly, is not very comfortable to control. Which is kind of why you have stuff like, Super Mario Run that, you know, really does work better for, that touchscreen style format. And I guess I got my first death, so that's a thing. Though in general, yeah, this is a game that has good game design. Just because there is kind of that thing of they slowly roll out the different types of enemies, so you can get used to it. You can observe their behavior over time. The color coding is you know very much indicative of how showing like, okay, red's normal, green is what happens if you don't hurry it up enough, blue is oh yeah, the last dude is there. Yeah. And I guess another thing that comes to mind is if you're someone who's watching this and you find that the image quality is not that good, I do apologize for that. Right now I'm really just kind of working with what I got at the moment. So how I'm playing this off of well, it's my original Game Boy Advance cartridge. Playing it on the Game Boy player, which is on the GameCube. I'm playing it with composite video, which in turn is being fed into a composite video to HDMI adapter, which is going into my capture unit. Well, it's also going into a switch, an HDMI switch, which then goes into my capture unit, but that isn't really something I would think would degrade the signal quality that much. But yeah, the thing is, I tried to kind of get this as good looking as possible, but right now it's, I mean, this is SD video. Ah, heck. I'm kind of figuring maybe, if I do find that I do enjoy streaming enough that I think, hey, maybe I'll want something more, maybe I'll do that. I know that one thing that's going to be coming up fairly soon is there's a bunch of things coming out that are supposed to be like Game Boy players with HDMI, like high definition quality. Like there's supposed to be that Retron Junior that's coming out. There's this other like portable system called the Analog Pocket that caught my my interest a short time ago. Oh boy, it's invisible. Oh, what is happening? I'm gonna fail this. Oh well. Yeah, just means I don't get any bonus points. But yeah, like I've heard that there's stuff that will they'll output, you know, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance stuff on a, you know, HD, you know, crisp quality, which would be pretty cool because this is sufficient. But like as sufficient as this is, and I'm glad to have it, I definitely understand that idea of, oh, you want to get those pixels as crisp as possible. And, you know, also having as few, like, artifacts, visual artifacts happening as possible. Because, I mean, it is the case that, you know, when you have something that, heck, I don't want, frick. It is kind of the unfortunate case that, like, you know, you just have a quick, cheapy little, little processor going on for the HDMI. There's going to be stuff that doesn't come out as well as it could. And I am kind of just using a cheap little converter that I don't think it was more than 15 bucks, if even that much. And yeah, having something that could maybe natively output HD would obviously be better. And yeah. So, okay, yeah, I've been saying before, this was my first Game Boy Advance game. And, you know, Super Mario Advance. I always found it kind of funny how their first choice, when it comes to, okay, hey, we're going to remake something for the Game Boy Advance. What should we do? The thought that they decided to go forward with the first one was Super Mario 2. Especially considering it's one of those games where it was one of those things that it started off originally as, you know, not a Mario game. I mean, like, that's kind of one of those things that's one of those things that's a non-secret is that Super Mario 2, or at least the Super Mario 2 that is generally known in the States, started its life as a platformer called Doki Doki Panic, which was not a Mario game, but got kind of dolled up a bit to kind of satisfy the North American market when it was decided that heck, that freaking fireball. But yeah, like, there had been that whole thing of they dolled up this Doki Doki Panic game as a Mario game when the original Mario Brothers 2 was deemed too difficult, too frustrating. And it's kind of a thing of... I've kind of wondered if it was almost like purposely a thing, if they wanted to have... Oh boy. I'm gonna be losing my lives. I almost kind of wonder if it was a thing of, oh, maybe they wanted to start off slow, and Mario Brothers 2 is kind of a odd one out, so it's like, hey, you start, heck, you start with this one, and you go to some of the more popular ones. Yeah, let's continue. But I mean, on the other hand, there's also the idea of when you start off a console, in this case, the Game Boy Advance, you kind of want to start with your best foot forward. I mean, then again, maybe there's just kind of a degree of popularity to this game that I'm not really thinking about. Anyway. I look away for one moment. Oh. Okay, let's try that again. But yeah, because, like, it's kind of one of those things where, like, I guess if anything, I would have figured, hey, maybe they would have remade the first Mario game? The first Super Mario Brothers? I am dying so much. I think they would have done that first, but then again, it was the case that they had done Super Mario Deluxe on the Game Boy Color. So maybe, in a sense, they were kind of treating this as the progression of, oh, we already did a remake of Mario 1, next we'll do a remake of Mario 2, which, you know, there's kind of a logic to that. But then again, it's also kind of the case that, the Mario Advance series was kind of out of order in so many ways. Because it was, I remember that Super Mario Bros. 3 was remade as Mario Advance 4? And... what was this? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Mario Advance 4, and the thing is, like, Mario Bros. 3 is kind of one of those ones that is so well loved and known and all that junk that it seems kind of weird that they would wait so long on that. But then again, those freaking icicles. But yeah, there's just so much about those games that it was this thing of Mario Advance. The Mario Advance quote-unquote series really was just weird in so many ways. Oh, come on. Yeah. But in any case, I guess it's kind of interesting kind of seeing what they did to kind of, you know, doll up this particular installment of Mario Brothers, because it's kind of you can kind of see some of what they did kind of also happening throughout other Game Boy Advance games, like when it came to doing remakes. Like, one kind of aspect to it is that they kind of brought everything up to this sort of pseudo Super Nintendo standard. Like, it wasn't quite there, but you can tell they tried to do as much as possible to kind of hit that mark. I mean, kind of some stuff is kind of inevitable because of just like technical limitations and what they needed to do, like how they kind of tended to wash the colors out, because that's what works well with the Game Boy Advance screen, and what they needed to do to make sure it could be visible. But the kind of, especially when it came to like trying to do some Super Nintendo games, they'd have to do stuff to, they would have to kind of change some control schemes around to make it work, because you don't have the full 4 face buttons. And then there's kind of the aspect of like other stuff that would be added in. Like, one thing that I kind of realized I associate a lot with when it comes to Game Boy Advance, like especially remakes of stuff, was the adding in of voice clips. Because there was stuff like, you know, in Super Mario Advance, they included, you know, more voice clips. Like, Mario would say stuff, Luigi would say stuff. And, you know, it's very small stuff, but, you know, you know, they were voice clips nonetheless. And, And because, like, I remember that because, you know, besides this, there was stuff like, in the A Link to the Past remake that they did for Game Boy Advance, they gave, you know, Link, you know, voice clips to go along with his actions. Like, they used the, I'm pretty sure they just straight up reused the voice clips of young Link from Ocarina of Time. Or if they didn't, they definitely got something that sounded like almost exactly like it. And so you'd have stuff so like whenever Link swung his sword, you know, he would make that yell sound that Link does. And it was kind of one of those things where it kind of wasn't really necessary, but kind of interesting to see happen. In particular, it has me thinking about it in terms of how it kind of affects the perception of the character. Because when it comes to the young Link voice, it's kind of the thing that has me thinking on the lower end of the teens much more than anything else. Because it's like, it evokes very specifically that idea of how young Link looks in Ocarina of Time. You know, he's definitely a child. But the thing is, that kind of doesn't come off as right to me entirely, because when I think about the Link from A Link to the Past, I tend to kind of think of him more as a teenager, you know, maybe something a bit in between his adult look from Ocarina of Time. But yeah, like, I kind of think of him as more that mid-teenage range, and so the voice clip to me always kind of sounded a bit too young for kind of how I figured he would be. So I guess that's kind of one of those things where it's like, like when people's, like, it's kind of one of those things that makes me think about how when something gets re-released, you know, there will be changes that are done and people will get kind of upset about it. And it was kind of one of those things where it wasn't the worst thing in the world to have happen, but it was kind of one of those things where it's like, it kind of changes the perception of the product a bit in a way that isn't necessarily positive and did not need to happen. Dang it. Those icicles keep getting me. Should I do that again? Yeah, let's try a little bit more. You know, kind of another thing I found kind of funny is the fact that this game did kind of receive, like, this Mario Brothers arcade remake was basically in every single instance of Super Mario Advance. Where it's like, I suppose that's not like a haha funny type thing, but it's just like, oh, that's kind of interesting that they decided to include that in every single variant of Super Mario Advance. Because it's like, oh yeah, it's because it's like, it's not just Super Mario Brothers 3, or it's not just Super Mario World. You get it, and you get a little slice of you know, Mario Brothers Arcade, which is kind of funny. I think especially when it comes down to the presentation of the games, because it is the case that, you know, when you boot up the game and you start up and it's like, okay, what do you want to play? It's like, you have this original full-featured console Mario game, this case being Mario Brothers 2, and then you also have Mario Brothers Arcade. And, you know, they're, you know, being presented equally, and, like, I guess it kind of makes sense with the, you know, like, okay, you know, people know it's there, they don't think that, you know, one thing doesn't exist just because it's a bit more hidden in menus, but at the same time, it's kind of funny because, well, this is a bit less featured. So I guess another way to put it is I definitely think of this Mario Brothers arcade classic, whatever you want to call it. It's definitely the bonus game. It is the B feature. Not that it's bad, but yeah. And I suppose one thing that's kind of good to know after, let's see, it looks like, oh, I've been playing this for about 40 minutes, huh? I suppose, it's at least keeping pace for pace with how, I was going with Kirby. Which is good because, I mean, because like I said at the very start, part of the point of this was to make sure, okay, do I have OBS set up right to properly handle streaming, because it had kind of, I had some difficulties with it after I did the Kirby stream. But this seems to be working out so far, which is pretty good. And hopefully it will stay that way. Let's see, another kind of fun thing that kind of comes out of tried to do prep for this and kind of thinking about, oh, what do I want to potentially do with this? I was kind of getting a chance to kind of dig through the old, you know, game carts and seeing like, oh, hey, what did I play once upon a time? And, oh, this is cool and all that. I forgot just kind of how many RPGs I kind of got indulged in when it came to Game Boy. Like, I guess in particular it's the matter of Final Fantasy. Like, I got pretty much every single, you know, Final Fantasy remake that was put onto the Game Boy Advance. You know, I got Dawn of Souls, you know, which was 1 and 2, and then there were the advanced remakes of, you know, 4, 5, and 6. And the silly thing about it, though, is that I've never... with the exception of Final Fantasy 1 on that Dawn of Souls cartridge, I haven't finished a Final Fantasy game. And that's something I'm probably gonna have to rectify that at some point. But yeah, I guess besides that, they're of course when it comes to, you know, RPGs and Game Boy, you know, Pokemon, definitely play Pokemon. Got a Sapphire and Fire Red cart. I also have a Leaf Green cart that I tried to do like a unique playthrough. Like, that was going to be my attempt at a Nuzlocke. I eventually found out that well, one thing is that I kind of got demotivated from that, like so many freaking things, but when it came to that Leaf Green cartridge in particular, I eventually found out that it was a bootleg after I had, like, I'd watched a YouTube video talking about how, oh yeah, you gotta keep an eye out for these Game Boy Advance carts. You can tell they're bootleg because there's the, you know, this and that and the other thing about the physical characteristics, and I was kind of disappointed to find out that the Leaf Green cartridge was a bootleg, but then I guess that's what I got for trying to be as super freaking cheap as possible and, you know, just getting something off of eBay. But that is another kind of one of those things, though, that I really want to give a try at giving a serious go, is a Pokemon Nuzlocke challenge. I tried to do it as like a comic type thing, and that wound up being a bad idea because that required a bit more drawing than I was used to. Which is dumb because I'm someone who would like to think of myself as an artist, but then again, I kind of have trouble keeping up the work ethic on that. That is so weird how the coin going in bounces somewhere around. Yeah, I mean, maybe... Kind of the nice thing about streaming is it can make playing stuff a bit easier. Sometimes, kind of, like, it, you know, it depends on technical difficulties, but yeah. Maybe I'll do a Nuzlocke at some point and kind of see how it feels. Not sure what I'd do with... Maybe I'd reset one of my Game Boy Advance cartridges and do it that way. Since that would be the easiest way to do it. See, you know, among other things, looking back over my collection of cartridges, got reminded of a few other things that were, you know, misfortunate. You know, kind of stuff that made me kind of wish I'd done well by them at first. Was noticing that, oh yeah, there had been that time I bought a Boktai cartridge. Because it was one of those things that I remember I rented it and had some fun with it, but I never bought the game proper, and I wish I did when it first came out, because I bought that Boktai cartridge. And unfortunately, it turned out that the internal battery had run down for it. And it was kind of a thing of, oh gosh, like, that's kind of bad, but, you know, maybe I can kind of look up how to reinsert a battery for it, which is kind of, you know, a thing that gets done. You know, because it's kind of one of those things where you can kind of easily get the coin battery type thing that works for it. You just pull out the old one and put the new in, and you can play your game like you used to. But I guess there's something about the Boktai cartridge with how it was designed. It's not so easy to just insert a new battery. I forget the exact reasoning. I think it had to do with, like, besides the battery backup, there's also the timing. And, of course, there's also just the fact that the Boktai cartridge, because it was designed with that solar sensor inside of it, just kind of has some wonky designness to it itself in general. And it's kind of one of those things that I don't think is ever going to really kind of make a comeback, which is sad, because Boktai really was an interesting premise for a game. Because, you know, you have that whole thing of, oh yeah, you're a vampire hunter, and you have that solar gun, and you literally got power from the sun hitting the cartridge. I remember there was they did a Nintendo DS iteration that was... It was just called Lunar Nights or something like that. That it made the solar component optional, and they did that by you know, they just had it, you know, be that so that the game kind of decided when the sun was out. You had the option to have the solar component by if you had a Boktai game cartridge with the solar panel. You could plug that into the Game Boy Advance slot, and it would work in that way. Which kind of ultimately kind of was for the best, I guess, because, I mean, hey, there is that thing of, unfortunately, the tech just kind of withers away after a while. snow seems to be where I hit my limit with this game. It's probably because of those icicles and stuff. It's kind of one of those things where, as I think about it, like, if they were to do, like, a Boktai remake for whatever reason, I would totally buy it. Just so I could have a chance to enjoy it. I'm not entirely sure how they would do it, like, at least when I think about it in terms of the Switch. Maybe if they did something like make a custom Joy-Con that has a solar sensor in it. Then again, that is a pretty specialized thing. Or I guess even if they just had like maybe some kind of a Bluetooth-enabled wearable, that could be a thing. Yeah. It really is kind of a thing that just is so dependent on how the technology was at the time. Like, it even kind of literally is a case of, I remember finding it fascinating to hear the story of why Boktai was made the way it was, which apparently was that, you know, you had a game designer who was trying to work with the idea of how do you make it so that you can easily play on a console like the Game Boy Advance that at the time did not have a backlight. How can you make it so that, you know, that is gotten around? Like, how can you make it so that you encourage people to play in light? In that particular instance, sunlight. And it's like, oh yeah, you have this kind of vampire kind of premise where, you know, it behooves the player to, you know, play in that fashion. Oh, I was a bit too brave on that. And that was kind of a neat way to do it. And it was kind of a thing of, oh yeah, it probably cost them extra to produce that cartridge. But at the same time, they came out with a pretty neat idea. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, I think about that, and that was a Konami game. And it's kind of sad because we're probably not going to see anything as interesting and fun as that out of Konami for a long time. Because that really is an interesting, you know, take on how to deal with something that could be an issue with a hardware design. Oh, I almost got hit by that one. Yeah. And it's kind of one of those things that I guess is one of those... it makes you appreciate the fact that, yeah, there is some stuff that you would hope that they would make sure to preserve, like, because there's always that thing about game history, and yeah, there's a lot that can be done to recreate old games on new systems, but sometimes there really is cases of there is stuff that is just so tied into the hardware that there's no way that you can do that. Like, you can't emulate it unless, like, you go through, you know, so many hoops to replicate that gameplay experience. And I know for some people they wouldn't miss that because there's stuff like Skyward Sword. Like, I enjoy some of the motion control stuff for Skyward Sword, but there were moments when it didn't work as well as maybe it would have if there was something a bit more definite. Like say the movement of a control stick. Yeah. but it's still also a thing of that's going to be a unique gameplay experience you're not going to be able to get anywhere else. You can approximate it, but it's not going to be quite something so easily replicated. It's kind of the same thing, you know, like when it comes to a lot of what's the word I'm trying to think of? When you have extra stuff on the side, accessories. When you use like special accessory controllers, like you're not always going to be easily able to replace them. Like another thing that comes to mind is light gun games. You're not going to be able to easily, you know, just remake those. And it's like, sure, you can kind of try to approximate it, but it's not going to quite be the same. I do kind of wish that they would try to recreate those a bit more. Like, try to find some way to maybe emulate the game and find some way to have that work on a modern TV. Like, I remember kind of thinking at one point, like, they could have done, like, a Duck Hunt remake, or did, like, some kind of thing with the old Duck Hunt game, ROM, where, you could have, like, a Wii remote pointer, you know, function by pointing that at the screen. And yeah, you're not going to have the exact accuracy, but you could also have, like, an on-screen cursor. It's still not the same. And I guess that is kind of the thing when it comes to a lot of it, is it's still just not going to be the same. Even if you kind of take measures like that. And we do kind of get some similar stuff with things like Labo. That's another thing I really like, is the Labo games. I suppose it's a bit hard to call them games sometimes, because really a lot of the things about those Labos where they were creativity and STEM, you know, education type things first, and the game stuff kind of was not quite adjacent or secondary, but it's like it was one of those things where it's like it was definitely more about the learning and the building and all that. But, you know, it was still fun to play stuff like the shooting games, or like the robot fighting crushing game. It's just kind of one of those things that I find kind of silly, like when it comes to light gun games. There's that aspect of there is not a way, or at least we haven't had people working on ways to have those old light gun games work on an HD TV, and like I get why, like there's the matter of the timing and how the technology specifically interacts with stuff. And it, like, because it is the case that like HD TVs, they need like an extra little bit of processing time to get stuff done. And that's why, like, you'll still have cases where it's like, oh yeah, you'll have this fighting game tournament going on, and or even just for whatever other reason, the standard definition tube TV is more preferable because it just has a freaking refresh rate that's better. Like there's just that less lag between what you do with your hands and what happens on the television. Yeah. So yeah, preserving preserving game history. Yeah, it's a thing that can't always just be done with, you know, remakes, remasters, whatever. Some stuff will just, you gotta have the old stuff. And it's, I guess, kind of part of why, come on. It's part of why I'm glad that I have held on to some of my old game stuff, because even though, like, by now, the Link to the Past remake that I have on my, for Game Boy Advance is outclassed by just the sheer fact that I can just pull up the old, Link to the Past, the original Super Nintendo one. I could just pull it up on my Switch whenever I want. And there's no compromises to it, and sure, I've lost the Four Swords component, but I don't need that. Though it would be kind of nice to have that be a thing in the future more often. Four Swords in general kind of needs to be a thing that is made more accessible, I think. But yeah, like, I am glad that I'm keeping this stuff around, and it's always there for me to replay whenever I like, I guess, unless, I guess until the day that finally the tech just stops working, because that is kind of the unfortunate fact that those cartridges aren't going to last forever. There's going to be, I think, in fact, I've heard it referred to as cartridge rot. It's going to happen that the tech's just going to degrade to the point that it doesn't work anymore. But at least for now it works. Like, I was glad to, like, when I first pulled this cartridge out, this Super Mario Advance cartridge out, and put it in to see how it works. I was glad to see that my progress still lasted, despite, you know, I haven't had the cartridge put into, I haven't played it, haven't had access to a form of charge in, years. Jeez. Oh, another funny thing, though, I forgot that I had put a Paris sticker on the back of, the card. Like, you know, Paris, like the Pokemon. I guess my thought at the time was, oh yeah, Paris, the mushroom Pokemon, goes with Mario, who sure does love them mush. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of something that I remember I used to put stickers on a lot of my stuff for a while, though I think I kind of stopped at some point with some stuff. Like, I remember I covered my Nintendo 64 and my PlayStation 1 in stickers at one point, and after a while I thought that was kind of garish. But now that I think about it, I did put a sticker on my my 3DS XL. So I guess that isn't completely gone. Then again, I made sure that was only just the one sticker, and I thought it was a pretty neat sticker. Centaur sticker. Big surprise for anyone who knows me. Although unfortunately, I kind of need to at some point see about getting that particular 3DS repaired at some point, because for whatever reason the left shoulder button doesn't always reliably work, and I'm kind of figuring at some point I better go ahead and get that sent in and replaced, fixed, while it's still a thing that they do repairs on 3DSs. especially since there are that's another game system where there's just so many things I need to, you know, play through and enjoy at some point. Kid Icarus Uprising comes to mind as an example, one of those things where if you have a wonky shoulder button, you're gonna have a bad time. I did not think that through. Yeah. I think I've kind of reached the point where I'm feeling some confidence that I'll be able to use this setup to play Game Boy Advance games and maybe even record them if I can get things working out right. I can finally do that Bomberman tournament thing. Maybe I'll try out some other stuff at some point. There's this robot fighting game that I picked up secondhand at a used game store at one point. Like, I think it was called Power Quest or something kind of generic sounding like that. Where it was like, it was pretty much that. It was like a fighting game, you know, like a Street Fighter type thing. Except it was a thing about how you controlled robots and did battle. They're like, you know, playground kids' toy size things apparently, but yeah. I remember I got into it just enough to kind of try it out, and yeah, like, it was an original Game Boy game, so it was not too sophisticated with its control scheme, but it was okay. I remember it also ended up being the case that one thing that kind of turned me off from trying to play around with it some more, I think, is that it did not use a battery backup. It used a password save. Which is one of those things that I recognize as kind of a necessity for some stuff. Like, it's that time when you can't always have the money to put in a battery backup save. But generally, I would think to do that with, like Mega Man is kind of something I can understand, where it's like, oh yeah, you have these discrete things where it's just whether or not you beat this stage, picked up these power-ups or whatever. But Power Quest was kind of one of those things where it was kind of an RPG sort of thing, where you would hope you'd be able to save and load whenever. A password is kind of awkward for that. And especially because there is that whole matter of, again, it comes down to, just the fact of, when you have a portable game, you want to be able to pick up and play it again, and passwords aren't really that well suited for it, I think. And I have reached the end. 2001 is when this came out, at least the remake version. Featuring Mario and Green Mario. Yeah. Well, I think I have suitably rambled for this past hour-ish. Yeah. This is a good stopping point. So, yeah. Thank you to the one viewer out there. Hope this was a tolerable time, and thank you for watching.